Jambo, greetings, hello. I hope you are all well from wherever you are watching us from. My name is Mothoni Karaoke. You can call me Noni, and you are watching NKR TV. My guest today is a gentleman who is doing a lot out here using his voice and his platforms to make awareness on the things that are affecting us as Africa and helping find sustainable solutions to these problems. I will let him introduce himself. Fadhel Kaboub.
Kaboub, yes.
How are you?
I'm doing great,
Should
thank you.
I say salam alaikum?
Alaikum salam.
Amazing. Have you learned Swahili?
Kidogo.
Oh, kidogo. Yeah, that means he has learned. So, karibu sana. We are very honored to have you today.
Thank you.
Thank you for making time for, young people out here coming to educate us and share your knowledge. So kindly, maybe you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So my name is Fadhel Kaboub. I'm a Tunisian economist. I spent a lot of time teaching in the United States at Denison University. Currently, I'm on academic leave based here in Nairobi with PowerShift Africa as a climate and development senior advisor, focusing a lot on the just energy transition, and as a member of the independent expert group on just transition and development.
Yes. Amazing. You have a lot of experience. You are an expert in your field. And the topic that we are going to talk today about, mostly climate, because we are in a climate crisis. The world is now rallying and calling for climate action. And you are in the midst of all this. So you are going to share with us, a little bit about that. And the fact that you are in the energy, you are a professor, right?
Yes.
So now I'm your student. We are your students. Please break this down for us, because one of the biggest problem that we've had with this in the climate space is the language barrier. By this I mean, the hard words. It's mostly young people. They might say that it's too complicated for us, to get into. I've been told that it's a white man problem. Yet we face this, climate crisis each and every day. So talk to us like kindergarten. Now it's not university, it's kindergarten. In the energy, one of the things that and the conversations that we hear about is the fossil fuels.
Yes.
Tell us, what are fossil fuels in the most basic language for us to understand fossil fuels, so that we're able, to now head towards finding solutions towards the fossil fuels.
Very well. Yes. So we start with a very simple fact, which is the climate crisis is caused by one major thing, which is humans burning fossil fuels to produce electricity, to produce energy. Fossil fuels are oil products, petroleum, gas, natural gas, coal, charcoal. So those are the main sources of fossil fuel. And we've been doing this as humanity since the Industrial Revolution. And the majority of the burning of fossil fuels has been done in the global north, in the industrialized world. Africa as a continent is responsible for less than 4% of global emissions. And yet, as a continent, we're in the front lines of, facing the most economic, ecological damage because of climate-induced catastrophes and events, from droughts and floods and changing weather patterns that destroy crops and destroy livelihoods. And of course, here in Nairobi, we've seen the impact of the floods.
Yes,
we've seen the impacts of droughts in some parts of East Africa. So that is the challenge.
Yes.
So the only way to move forward, if we take the science seriously, the science is telling us that we should be, number one, not increasing the amount of fossil fuels that we're extracting, the infrastructure that we're building.
Yes.
And number two, we should be phasing out or completely eliminating as quickly as possible the existing infrastructure. And of course, we have to do this in a fair way. The countries that have contributed the most to the climate damage should be the first to phase out fossil fuels and phase out as rapidly as possible. Number two, they should be the countries who compensate the developing countries, the African countries in particular, for the cost of the transition, the cost of finding alternative sources of energy, the cost of transitioning jobs, because a lot of people are working in industries that use fossil fuels or produce fossil fuels.
Yes.
So that's what we call a just transition, by underlining the concept of justice.
Okay, maybe to cut you a bit short, Mr. Kaboub has told us what are these fossil fuels that we keep on hearing. They are some of the basic things that we are using in our daily lives. The electricity, how the electricity is produced. There is fossil fuel, the oil that our vehicles use as we move around each and every day. Still, it is producing, some of these harmful gases. So do not overthink this. These are just things that we are using each and every day. As an individual, the consumption is very low, but we have these big industries that are producing the most toxic gases, the most, using the oil and consuming. They are the big polluters, and that is where the conversation really, we want to focus on that, because we are calling for a transition. Even as we improve on our daily lives in the little way that we can, there is where the change needs to happen. A big change needs to happen, and that is what Mr. Kaboub has just tried to tell us. So when we mention fossil fuels, do not digress. We are just talking about the coal, oil, and gas. And you have said that since when beginning of the industrialization period, as we know, Africa, we are very affected by the climate crisis, but we are not that developed really to have produced all these very deadly gases that are killing the planet. That's why you said global south. I think you mentioned a global south.
Yes.
And these are mostly African countries and other underdeveloped countries, I'll say still developing countries, that are very affected. Yet we are still not yet there. We cannot be compared to these countries. And that's why you were saying for the just transition. So what is this transition? Tell them, just transition. Moving from the fossil fuels towards what?
So in the narrow sense of the term, when people think of the transition, they're thinking simply the transition from an old energy system based on fossil fuels to a new energy system based on renewables like wind and solar and geothermal. But for us, from an African perspective, the transition, in order for it to be just, it needs to be way beyond just the source of energy. It's about transforming the entire system.
The entire system.
As you know, no country can function without energy. We use it for heating, cooling, transportation, electricity production. It's fundamental. And for our countries that have relied on this old energy system, the fossil fuel system, even though we have a lot of fossil fuels on the continent, it has never delivered development or energy access to our people or energy security. Even the richest oil producing countries on the continent, Nigeria, our biggest exporter, imports 100% of its gasoline from international markets. Angola, the second largest producer of oil on this continent, imports 80% of its fuel from international market. And this is not by accident. This is by design. So the good news is that the renewable energy opportunity that we have on the African continent is tremendous. According to the International Renewable Energy Agency, by 2040, which is just in a few years, Africa, with existing technologies, not with new innovations, Africa can produce 1,000 times its anticipated energy needs and can completely replace all of our fossil fuel exports. That means that as a continent, we have the biggest renewable energy potential. Even better, all the strategic minerals that are needed for the energy transition are available on the continent.
Then another term has been introduced, renewable energy. So when we talk about the fossil fuel, the coal, oil, and gas, we want to do away with that. But where are we going? We are heading towards renewable energy. And as he mentioned, we have the sun, which is the solar. We have wind. We have, what else do we have?
We have hydro.
We have hydro.
We have geothermal energy.
Geothermal energy. These are renewable sources of energy. And that is where we want to go to, because they do not pollute the environment. Although maybe in the making of this, in the making and producing of some of this energy, is there somewhere where maybe we could also be polluting the environment?
If you're using fossil fuels to produce electricity to manufacture solar panels, then yes. But eventually we'll have enough solar and wind and geothermal capacity to power the factories with renewables. Right?
So it's a gradual process, but it needs to start as soon as today. So that we cannot just turn in a day, They say Rome was not built in a day.
It's a transition. It's a process.
Exactly. It's a transition, is a process. Because again, these systems have accumulated over time. You know, the industrialization period was not just a year. It's still ongoing.
Yep.
So we cannot just wake up and say that we want now to remove it immediately. We need to transition. And that is why we are calling for a just transition. So wait, you are telling me that there's a problem. Yes, we have a crisis and an energy problem. But we have the solution. And we are Africa. This is Africa. Africa is our business through and through.
Yes.
So you're telling me that we actually have the solution in our hands.
And it's a tremendous opportunity to completely transform the continent. I think you've heard me say that we can't decarbonize a system without decolonizing it. And Africa,
say that.
We can't decarbonize a system that hasn't been economically and structurally decolonized yet. So in other words, Africa during colonial times was assigned a particular economic role.
Yes.
The role of the place for cheap raw materials for the industrialized world, the role as the consumers of industrial output and technology, and most importantly, the role that was imposed on us as the place where obsolete technologies, assembly line manufacturing that is no longer needed in the industrialized world is outsourced to us under the label of development, cooperation, job creation. But effectively what it does is that it locks us permanently at the bottom of the global value chain. So,
how did we get there?
That was a colonial role that was imposed. That was colonialism.
Colonialism
was not a system of economic development. It was a system of extraction of wealth.
Okay, yes.
By the colonizers.
Yes,
so
yes.
It was not meant to deliver good results.
No.
It was not an architecture that was designed for sustainable development or a just transition or human rights or anything. It was an abusive, coercive, violent, hierarchical system that was imposed on the African continent. And those three colonial roles that I described, we still play that role today.
Okay.
And what we're saying is that we cannot have a just transition without undoing the colonial role that we still play.
Yes.
And the opportunity that we have today is that we have the biggest potential for renewable energy production. We have all the raw materials, the critical minerals on this continent to manufacture and deploy the clean energy infrastructure, the clean cooking infrastructure, the clean transportation infrastructure. We have the youngest labor force population on the planet with the potential of hundreds of millions of jobs over the next 30 years to be created to truly industrialize the continent and industrialize on our terms.
Yes.
Not to manufacture things for other people to consume, but to manufacture and deploy the building blocks of development and prosperity.
Okay.
What is lacking for this true green industrial revolution on the African continent is not the raw materials, it's not the labor, it's access to what we call life-saving technology.
Okay.
The technology to manufacture and deploy the basic infrastructure.
Okay. Professor, excuse me, teacher. Yes. We said we're in class. I have a question. So we got there because of these systems were built over during the colonial, and they have gone on post-colonial period. So we need to first shift. There needs to be a shift in the system. We inherited these negative traits from the colonial period, which continue to affect, though we are independent, the systems still continue to affect our function. And it's still as if we're still under colonialism. That's a problem for all of Africa.
Absolutely.
For all of Africa?
For all of Africa
yes.
And the rest of the global south.
Yes, and the rest of the global south. Yes.
Colonies. This is the system, what we call the global economic architecture. It was not designed by us. It was not designed for us. So it cannot be the same economic architecture that will deliver a just transition for us.
Yeah.
So that's why we're saying no decarbonization without decolonization of our economies.
Yeah, I know we will get to the solutions later on. So on the decolonization, what does that call for?
It means that we have to go to the root causes of our economic deficiencies.
Yes.
And in Africa in particular, we have three major economic deficiencies that actually are the root cause of our external debt.